The Jasmine Richardson and Jeremy Steinke case is one of the most chilling and disturbing crimes in Canadian history. In April 2006, a young girl, just 12 years old, conspired with her 23-year-old boyfriend to brutally murder her entire family in cold blood. The small town of Medicine Hat, Alberta, was forever changed by the crime, as a once seemingly normal and happy family became the victims of a gruesome and premeditated massacre. This case not only shocked Canada, but also gained international attention due to its horrifying details. It was a case of forbidden love, obsession, manipulation, and a descent into darkness influenced by Gothic subcultures, violent fantasies, and a deeply disturbing relationship between a minor and an adult. The tragedy raised serious concerns about the influence of online communities, youth crime, and the justice system's ability to handle young offenders. Jasmine Richardson was born in 1993 and grew up in the quiet, suburban town of Medicine Hat, Alberta, Canada. From the outside, she appeared to have a normal and happy childhood. She was raised in a loving, middle-class household by her parents, Mark and Deborah Richardson, alongside her younger brother, Jacob, who was just 8 years old at the time of the murders. Jasmine's parents were known to be caring and responsible. Mark Richardson was an electronics expert, while Deborah worked as a well-respected teacher's assistant. They were hardworking, involved in their community, and deeply invested in providing a stable life for their children. Their youngest, Jacob, was described as a cheerful and kind-hearted little boy who adored his sister. To those who knew them, the Richardsons were a normal, happy family with no history of abuse, dysfunction, or violence. However, despite the outwardly perfect home life, something within Jasmine changed as she approached adolescence. Before the age of 11 or 12, Jasmine had been a well-adjusted, happy child who excelled in school and was known for her friendly demeanor. She was involved in school activities and had a good relationship with her family. However, as she entered puberty, her personality and interests took a dark turn. Jasmine became increasingly drawn to goth culture, horror, and themes of death and rebellion. She began dressing in dark clothing, wearing heavy eyeliner, and immersing herself in alternative music and Gothic online communities. Her attitude toward authority, especially toward her parents, became more rebellious and defiant. Like many preteens, she clashed with her parents over simple things like curfews, friendships, and her new choice of clothing and music. However, in Jasmine's case, this rebellion escalated into something far more sinister. Around the time she turned 12, Jasmine became heavily involved in dark and disturbing online forums, including the social networking site vampirefreaks.com. This website was a haven for Gothic subcultures, alternative music, and macabre fantasies. It was also where she would meet Jeremy Steinke, the man who would change her life forever. On these sites, Jasmine created an online persona that was much darker than her real-life self. She adopted usernames that hinted at her obsession with death, vampires, and rebellion. She posted pictures of herself in dark makeup, fishnet clothing, and Gothic accessories, painting a picture of a troubled teen fascinated by the macabre. Jasmine's parents began to worry about her behavior and online activities. They restricted her internet access and tried to keep her away from negative influences. But instead of pulling away from the dark world she was exploring, Jasmine only became more secretive and resentful toward her parents. Jasmine's fate took a deadly turn when she met Jeremy Steinke online. At 23 years old, he was a full-grown adult engaging with a 12-year-old child. This alone should have been a red flag, but Jasmine did not see their relationship as dangerous. Instead, she saw it as romantic and rebellious. Jeremy, who also identified as a self-proclaimed vampire, convinced Jasmine that they were soulmates. He reinforced her hatred toward her parents and encouraged her to believe that her family was the only thing standing in the way of their love. As Jasmine became more obsessed with Jeremy, her fantasies turned darker. The once innocent girl who had grown up in a loving home began considering murder as a solution to her problems. It was a complete transformation. Jasmine Richardson, the ordinary schoolgirl, was now planning a massacre. Unlike Jasmine Richardson, who grew up in a stable and loving home, Jeremy Steinke's early life was marked by dysfunction, instability, and abuse. He was born on January 10, 1983, making him 23 years old at the time of the murders. His upbringing was vastly different from Jasmine's, and it played a significant role in shaping his disturbing personality and violent tendencies. Jeremy was raised in Medicine Hat, Alberta, in a household filled with alcoholism, abuse, and neglect. His mother was an alcoholic who frequently changed partners, many of whom were physically and emotionally abusive. The constant presence of violence and instability in his home life warped Jeremy's perception of normal relationships. Jeremy himself was often bullied at school, which further alienated him from his peers. He was considered awkward, socially isolated, and prone to aggressive outbursts. He struggled academically and had difficulty making friends, which led him to retreat into fantasy worlds filled with darkness, horror, and supernatural elements. As Jeremy grew older, he became heavily involved in the goth and vampire subcultures. He embraced dark themes, wore black clothing, and claimed to be a 300-year-old werewolf or vampire. He frequently talked about drinking blood and acted out violent, vampire-like behaviors, including hissing at people and wearing a vial of blood around his neck. His belief in supernatural entities and gothic fantasies was not just for show. Jeremy truly thought he was something more than human. He often spoke about his hatred for society, his violent thoughts, and his fantasies of revenge against those who had wronged him. He also began using drugs and alcohol heavily, which only worsened his mental state. Friends described him as erratic, aggressive, and obsessed with death. His interest in violent music, horror films, and dark literature further fueled his twisted worldview. Like Jasmine, Jeremy was active on dark, gothic-themed online forums, including vampirefreaks.com. He frequently posted disturbing messages about death, killing, and rebellion. His online presence was filled with references to murder, anarchy, and a deep resentment toward authority figures. It was on one of these websites that Jeremy met Jasmine Richardson, a 12-year-old girl who was fascinated by the same dark themes. Despite their massive age gap, Jeremy saw Jasmine as his soulmate and an opportunity to mold someone into his twisted fantasy world. Jeremy's interest in a preteen girl was predatory from the start. He was fully aware of her age, but instead of recognizing the inappropriateness, he romanticized their relationship as a gothic love story, one that could only be fulfilled by eliminating those who opposed them. One of Jeremy's biggest inspirations was the movie Natural Born Killers, a controversial 1994 film about a young couple who go on a violent killing spree together. Jeremy was obsessed with this movie and identified with the main characters, Mickey and Mallory Knox, a couple who kill without remorse. He frequently compared himself and Jasmine to Mickey and Mallory, believing that they were destined to be together, no matter the cost. He encouraged Jasmine to embrace the idea of killing her family as a necessary step in their love story, and Jasmine, already immersed in gothic fantasies, eagerly accepted the idea. Though he had never been convicted of a serious crime before the murders, Jeremy had a known history of violent behavior. He had previously talked about killing people, and those who knew him often described him as unstable, unpredictable, and aggressive. He had threatened people in the past, and many suspected that it was only a matter of time before he acted on his violent impulses. His relationship with Jasmine became the perfect storm. She was young, impressionable, and desperate for love, while he was dangerous, manipulative, and eager to turn fantasy into reality. The Richardson family had no idea that their 12-year-old daughter was planning their murder with her 23-year-old boyfriend. On the evening of April 22, 2006, Jasmine Richardson and Jeremy Steinke put their deadly plan into action. Jeremy, intoxicated on drugs and alcohol, made his way to the Richardson home in Medicine Hat, Alberta. His mission was clear: slaughter Mark and Deborah Richardson so they could no longer stand in the way of his relationship with Jasmine. Kill 8-year-old Jacob Richardson because he was a potential witness. Jasmine's mother, Deborah Richardson, was the first to die. She was asleep in the basement when Jeremy entered the house. Armed with a large knife, Jeremy lunged at her, stabbing her repeatedly. The attack was brutal and relentless. Deborah fought back with all her strength, but Jeremy was too strong and too determined to kill. As she screamed in terror, Mark Richardson, Jasmine's father, was woken by the sounds of violence and rushed downstairs. Mark immediately saw the horrific scene: his wife bleeding, his daughter's boyfriend standing over her with a knife. He charged at Jeremy, trying to protect his family. The two got into a violent struggle, with Mark managing to land punches on Jeremy, even knocking him to the ground. However, Jeremy, fueled by rage and intoxication, managed to overpower him. Mark was stabbed over 24 times, with 9 deep wounds directly to his back. His throat was cut open, and he bled out on the basement floor. As her parents lay lifeless in a pool of blood, Jasmine was upstairs. She knew her little brother Jacob was still alive, and she had agreed to kill him. Jacob Richardson was only 8 years old, an innocent child who had no idea that his own sister had plotted his death. As the sounds of violence echoed through the house, Jacob cowered in his room, terrified. When Jasmine entered, he was crying, realizing something was terribly wrong. "I'm scared. What's going on?" he reportedly said. Jasmine, with no hesitation, grabbed a knife and attacked her little brother. She stabbed him in the chest, but he fought back, begging for his life. As he pleaded with her, asking, "Why?" Jasmine showed no mercy. She slit his throat, watching as her own little brother bled out on his bed. Afterwards, she and Jeremy stood over Jacob's body, watching as the life drained from him. They had completed their plan. The Richardson family was dead. Once the murders were complete, Jasmine and Jeremy left the crime scene. Rather than feeling guilt, they were elated, proud of what they had done. They fled to a friend's house where they celebrated by doing more drugs and having sex. Jeremy even boasted about the killings, telling his friends, "It was really great. It felt so amazing." Jasmine, equally unbothered, bragged about her involvement, showing no remorse. They believed that they had gotten away with murder, but the truth would soon catch up with them. The following morning, April 23, 2006, a young neighbor boy went to the Richardson house to see if his friend, 8-year-old Jacob, could come out to play. As he approached the house, he noticed something unusual. The windows were dark, the door was left slightly open, and there was an eerie stillness in the air. Curious but wary, the boy peered through a window, and what he saw would haunt him forever. Inside the home, he saw blood splattered across the walls and what appeared to be lifeless bodies on the floor. Panicked, he ran back home and told his mother, who immediately called the police. When officers arrived at the Richardson home, they were unprepared for the brutality of the crime scene. Deborah Richardson's body was in the basement, stabbed multiple times, her throat slashed. Mark Richardson lay nearby, his body covered in blood, showing signs of a violent struggle. Upstairs in his bedroom, 8-year-old Jacob was found in his bed, his throat cut, his small frame soaked in blood. As officers surveyed the horrifying crime scene, they noticed something even more shocking. Jasmine Richardson was not among the victims. At first, police feared she had been abducted. Given the brutality of the murders, it was assumed that she had been kidnapped by the killer or was in immediate danger. However, as they continued investigating, something didn't add up. Inside Jasmine's room, police found her personal items intact. Nothing was disturbed. Then they discovered Jasmine's computer, where she had exchanged disturbing emails and messages with Jeremy Steinke. The messages were filled with talk of murder, rebellion, and a shared fantasy of killing her family so they could be together forever. One message stood out. Jasmine had told Jeremy, "I have this plan. It begins with me killing them and ends with me living with you." The shocking realization hit. Jasmine Richardson wasn't kidnapped. She was responsible for the murders. With this new revelation, police quickly issued an alert for Jasmine and Jeremy Steinke, treating them as prime suspects. Their investigation led them to Jeremy's friends, who revealed that after the murders, Jasmine and Jeremy had been boasting about what they had done. They were acting normal, laughing, kissing, and telling us how much fun it was, one friend reported. Jeremy had even made a chilling confession, saying, "We slaughtered them like pigs." Meanwhile, Jasmine showed no remorse, instead expressing frustration that they had to leave town so soon. They planned to flee to a distant location, believing they could start a new life together as fugitives. Jasmine and Jeremy didn't get far. On April 24, 2006, just a day after the murders, they were found in Leader, Saskatchewan, a town about 130 kilometers, 80 miles, away from Medicine Hat. The two were hiding in the back of a truck, seemingly unaware that police were closing in on them. When officers arrested Jeremy, he smirked and laughed, showing no signs of fear or remorse. Jasmine, too, was eerily calm, offering no apology, no panic, just a quiet acceptance that she had been caught. They were both charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder, facing one of the most shocking and controversial trials in Canadian history. Following their arrest on April 24, 2006, both Jasmine Richardson and Jeremy Steinke were taken into custody and interrogated separately. Despite being a 12-year-old girl accused of murdering her family, Jasmine showed no signs of remorse or fear. She spoke in a cold, detached manner, as if she were discussing a normal event rather than the brutal slaughter of her parents and younger brother. During her police interview, she minimized her involvement at first, but later admitted, "I thought it would bring us closer together." Jasmine never cried, never expressed regret. She was more concerned about what would happen to her and Jeremy than about the fact that her family was dead. Jeremy, on the other hand, was smug and arrogant during his interrogation. He laughed and bragged about the murders, making chilling statements such as, "You ever watch Natural Born Killers? That's us." He even claimed to be a werewolf, telling officers that he had the power to sense things that normal humans couldn't. His delusions were on full display, but his guilt was undeniable. The prosecution had a mountain of evidence against Jasmine and Jeremy, including online messages and emails between Jasmine and Jeremy detailing their plan to kill her family. Eyewitness testimony from Jeremy's friends, who said he had confessed to the murders and shown no remorse. Forensic evidence, including blood from the victims on Jeremy's clothing and knife wounds, matching the weapons found in their possession. Despite the overwhelming proof, Jasmine and Jeremy pleaded not guilty, claiming that they had been influenced by their emotions and fantasies. Since Jasmine was only 12 years old at the time of the murders, Canadian law dictated that a minor under the age of 14 could not be sentenced as an adult. This meant that despite being found guilty of 3 counts of first-degree murder, Jasmine could only receive a maximum sentence of 10 years. Her sentence included 4 years in a psychiatric facility for rehabilitation, 4 additional years under community supervision after her release, 2 years of supervised living before full reintegration into society. For many, this felt like a gross miscarriage of justice. A girl who had helped murder her entire family would be walking free by the time she was 22 years old. Unlike Jasmine, Jeremy had no legal protection due to his age. At 23 years old, he faced the full extent of the law. During his trial, his disturbing fantasies, lack of remorse, and manipulative behavior were put on full display. He was convicted of 3 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for 25 years. Despite this, Jeremy remained devoted to Jasmine, even proposing to her in jail. She accepted his proposal, though their engagement was never legally recognized. When the verdicts were announced, there was public outrage, especially over Jasmine's light sentence. People couldn't understand how someone who planned and participated in a triple murder could be back in society within a decade. Many believed she had manipulated the justice system, just as she had manipulated Jeremy into helping her commit the crime. But the law was clear. Jasmine was still a child under Canadian law, and no matter how brutal her crimes were, she could not receive a harsher sentence. This case sparked debates about youth sentencing laws in Canada, with many calling for harsher punishments for young offenders involved in extreme crimes. Jasmine Richardson was released from prison in 2016 after serving her full sentence. She changed her identity and reintegrated into society under strict monitoring. Jeremy Steinke remains in prison, serving his life sentence. He will be eligible for parole in 2031, but it is unclear whether he will ever be released. One of the most controversial aspects of this case is Jasmine Richardson's early release and her reintegration into society. After serving 4 years in a psychiatric facility, Jasmine completed her rehabilitation program and began her supervised reintegration. She was given therapy, education, and life skills training, all with the goal of releasing her back into society as a rehabilitated individual. By 2011, Jasmine had been granted supervised freedom, meaning she could attend school, work, and live outside of prison under strict conditions. By 2016, when she turned 22, Jasmine Richardson was fully released from the justice system, having served the maximum 10-year sentence for a youth offender. Upon release, Jasmine was given a new identity and has remained hidden from the public ever since. Her psychologists and parole officers claim she showed signs of rehabilitation, stating that she accepted responsibility for her actions and understood the magnitude of her crimes. Despite this, many people remain skeptical, believing that no amount of rehabilitation can truly change someone who planned and carried out the murder of their entire family. Jasmine has since gone to university and reportedly lived a normal life, though her exact whereabouts remain a mystery. Unlike Jasmine, Jeremy Steinke was not given a second chance. He remains incarcerated in a Canadian prison, serving his life sentence without the possibility of parole until 2031. Jeremy has repeatedly appealed for parole and early release, but so far, all efforts have been denied. He has also changed his name to Jackson May, attempting to distance himself from his past, though his crimes are far too infamous for him to ever truly escape them. Some reports suggest that he has been involved in educational and rehabilitation programs in prison, but given his past manipulative tendencies, many believe he is simply playing the system. During their incarceration, Jeremy and Jasmine were still in love, even getting engaged in prison. However, after her rehabilitation and release, Jasmine severed ties with him completely. Jeremy, on the other hand, continued to talk about their love story, seemingly refusing to let go of the fantasy. Despite his continued obsession, Jasmine moved on, building a new life while he remained behind bars, unable to escape his past.